Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the annual meeting, and a particular welcome to those joining us online. Very good that you've been able to stay on or attend the meeting online. Given the pandemic, this is an unusual annual meeting in that we are reporting on 2 years, so 2019 and 2020. So we will hear reports from myself, from the church wardens, from the treasurer with the accounts, as well as from the PCC secretary, and a report from the Deanery Synod and on the Electoral Roll. And we thought it simplest if each speaker just spoke once, so addressed 2019, then moved on to 2020, rather than us going back and forth ad infinitum. So first, I'll hand over to Nick Hodgson as PCC secretary as we open the Vestry meeting to appoint the church wardens, and then we will open the annual parochial church meeting for the appointment of PCC and synod members before going on to the report. So thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Father Mark. Last year, everybody was automatically re-elected. So although we'll be having reports on 2 years, we're only going to need elections for the 1 year. And I'm pleased to say that you won't have to vote. It's not going to be complicated because for everything we have the right number of nominations for the right number of people. So the Vestry meeting, which is slightly different because anybody in the parish, whether they come to church or not, is entitled to come to the Vestry meeting. I'm not sure they have. There are 2 nominations for church warden, Vanessa Denny and Jeremy Martin, and I am delighted to declare that they are both elected church wardens again. So we look forward to Jez and Vanessa working with us. Last year should have been the election to the Deanery Synod. That has had to be postponed to this year. There are 5 places on the Deanery Synod, and there are 5 nominations. Wael Kasim, Emmanuel Adesoye, Linda Phillips, Samson Ogunbanjo, and Nicholas Hodgson. So I declare that all 5 of them are elected to the Deanery Synod. They serve for 3 years, so those 5 are automatically on the PCC for the next 3 years. So if you wanted to get rid of Emmanuel or me or Linda, bad luck. The PCC, there are 12 posts and there are 12 nominations. Linda Kesser, Charlene Taylor, Kumba Negba, Mark Dickinson, Elaine Reed-Hamilton, Matthew Gibbs, Neil Hall, Margaret Grossier, Lucy Rybin, Bernice Kudjoe, Faith Lockchen, Tundi Opadeji. Sorry, I've come round to the beginning again. I was going to read Linda Kesser again. So I declare those 12 are elected to the PCC. Just to say, we welcome new members to the PCC. So the last 5 names that I read, or last 4, Lucy, Bernice, Faith, and Tundi, new members to the PCC, and Wael as well to the Deanery Synod. Over the last 2 years, Royston, Gus, and James Shakunbi resigned, and Irene Tewagbadi and Diana Rollinson-Williams have not stood again. So 12 PCC members, 5 Deanery Synod members, 2 church wardens. We have 4 clergy on the PCC, so it is an enormous body, but please do pray for us as we seek to reopen, rebuild, and welcome people back. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Nick. So we proceed now with the reports of 2019 and 2020. And I'd like to say a very big thank you, first of all, to our excellent church wardens, Vanessa and Jez, who've offered consistent and thoughtful leadership in challenging times. And it's excellent they've been re-elected for another year. A very big thank you also to Linda Kesse and Emmanuel Adeshoye, who are our deputy church wardens who've shared responsibilities with Vanessa and Jez. So this excellent team of 4, I think we have better structures for supporting our ministry in the parish. Many thanks also to those who've served on the PCC and the Deanery Synod, both those continuing and those taking a break, and we warmly welcome our new members to the PCC and Synod today. Thank you very much indeed for your willingness to serve. Can we show our appreciation, please? Thank you. So moving on to my 2019 report. At the beginning of 2019, we had a very successful stewardship campaign, which was led by Mother Helen. And Mother Helen, in her time with us, had an extremely fruitful ministry, not least setting up the Tuesday evening youth club, Divine Youth Centre, which had a very successful pilot with St. Gabriel's students coming in their dozens for food and games and music and conversation. That work was unfortunately suspended due to the pandemic, but we are determined to start this very, very important work back again in September, all things being equal. In the first half of 2019, Bishop Christopher came to license Father Sebastian as our new chaplain at St. Gabriel's College and as assistant priest here at St. John the Divine in succession to Mother Ellen. And serious work was then begun on the fundraising for the chapel, and many thanks to all those who contributed to the fundraising for St. Gabriel's Chapel. Father Seb has been a wonderful addition to the team here, as I'm sure you'd agree. In May, the Consort Choir, that's our teenagers, enjoyed a residential in Norfolk and sang at the Julian Shrine in Norwich for Father Richard Stanton there. And also then the next day sang the Ascension Day Mass at Norwich Cathedral. Then, in the middle of 2019, if you can think that far back, we had our second Windrush Sunday celebration, establishing Windrush Sunday in the annual calendar, with Jarell Robinson-Brown as the excellent preacher and a proper party afterwards with food and drink and dancing and sound systems. Fast on the heels of Windrush, we welcomed a new deacon into our midst, Father Nick, along with the lovely Ruth and Theo. And Father Nick, I'm sure you'd agree, has been an enormous asset, and what a joy it is to have them all here with us. The social team worked extremely hard through 2019 as usual, and among many other things, we had a very successful harvest supper, but also a lovely wine tasting, all raising funds for our mission charities. Moving on to 2020, right at the beginning of the year, I celebrated 10 years in the parish as the vicar. What a wonderful party was thrown. Thank you so much to everyone for your immense generosity with the wonderful party and generous gift. It truly was very, very memorable. Later in January, we had admissions to Holy Communion with very many of our children from church and from the primary school and from our choirs receiving Holy Communion for the first time. Also during Epiphany Tide, at the end of January, we had the very significant milestone of the retirement of Richard Burgin as the senior sacristan after almost 40 years ministry in this role. Richard trained, let's give him a round of applause. Richard trained countless servers in his time and supported dozens and dozens of clergy along the way, and has handed on to Victor and Timmy, who he trained to do the job so well today. Many thanks to you, Richard, for your dedication and service over these so many years. Who would have thought at Epiphany Tide 2020 what the rest of the year would look like? We'd heard of coronavirus at the beginning of the year, but we'd had bird flu and SARS and other viruses in recent memory, and we were not prepared for what the impact of COVID-19 would be. Lockdown meant that our gathering together for worship and fellowship would grind to a halt. And we were faced with alien concepts such as social distancing. We went over to online worship, and an overzealous Church of England told us that not even the priest was allowed in the church. So worship was initially broadcast from my study. That took some tidying up, I can tell you. Our online worship improved hugely over time, though, and we are immensely grateful to Ben Clark for his creativity and painstaking work in video editing our online worship, and also Timmy and Victor and Wale joining Ben, myself and Father Nick for weekly recording sessions in church. One of the knock-on effects of the pandemic, of which there were many, of course, was that we had to take a hard look at our resources and how we use them. This caused us to take a look at our largest expenditure after the parish share, the quota we pay to the diocese, which is music. It became increasingly clear that much of the post of organist and director of music was undeliverable because of the pandemic. This post was one that had grown in the last decade to be 4 times the scale of the original post, to include, among other things, the development of a multi-million-pound organ project and the development of the church as a performance venue. Things that in the short to medium term, pandemic and immediate post-pandemic, would clearly not be deliverable. It was, therefore, with a very heavy heart and not without a certain amount of upset that we had to say farewell to Lionel after his 14 years of loyal service. We wish Lionel and Jill well, and I'm delighted to report that Lionel has recently taken up the post of organist and master of music at the very fine church of St. John's, Upper Norwood. The pandemic, of course, presented many challenges for our schools, but both St. John's and St. Gabriel's have fared very well in the circumstances. And at the height of lockdowns, when children were out of school, members of the congregation were involved in delivering food parcels to our most vulnerable families. But there were other chinks of light in the year as we celebrated Father Nick's belated ordination to the priesthood, and then in time for Father Nick's first Mass, we were allowed to have the consort choir singing on what was a glorious evening that we were able to celebrate in person and online. The murder of George Floyd at the hands of police officers in the United States of America and the increased focus of the Black Lives Matter movement caused us all to think again about racism and how ingrained it is in our society and in our institutions. We were shocked into realizing that we could no longer be complacent about the sin of racism, which, far from being a thing of the past, is very much alive in church and society today. As much as we like to think we here are a welcoming place, we at St. John's have had to think very seriously about how we organise ourselves, how things are structured within our church and parish, and ask ourselves serious questions about covert racism, unconscious bias, unjust structures, and the barriers that exist within our own community before we start challenging others in wider church and society. This is very much a work in progress, and I, for one, are deeply concerned that we don't lose the impetus and the energy that the martyrdom of George Floyd has given us. So we set up a small group this year in the parish looking at racial justice, reflecting on where we are as a parish, but also at the role we might play in the wider church and community. And one of the things that has so far come out of that conversation are the Advent podcasts, which were an opportunity to hear from those within our community, but also a strong desire to see more integration within the music, which is such an important part of our identity as a parish. Mother Helen left us in summer 2020 to take up her new role as parish priest at St. Philip's, Avondale Square. Helen made an immense contribution here. I've mentioned the youth club and stewardship, but also the setting up of the poetry group and the quality of her preaching and ministry among us. St. Philip's are truly blessed to have Mother Helen, and we are ready to support her and the parish if there are ways in which we can, as St. John's, help resource ministry there. We gained a new pastoral assistant at the beginning of the first lockdown, Wael Kasim, who has done an extraordinary job of getting stuck in with all the restrictions that have been in place. A particular highlight were the Advent podcast that I mentioned, which Wael curated. And Wael has gained in confidence, I think, since being here, and has become a real asset in our mission and our ministry. Can we show our appreciation, please? There are many challenges going forward as we encourage people back to church and attempt to draw in new people. But I'm very heartened that over the last few weeks, people have started returning who we haven't seen in church for some time. And we are planning events over the next few months to encourage people back in, beginning with the last Sunday in June, Indian variant notwithstanding, when we hope to celebrate Windrush Sunday and also welcome a new deacon, Charlie Bell. There is a job to be done, but we are fortunate that we have many resources of people, both lay and ordained, and we can do it. Following the restructuring in the music department, we now have Ben Clark as the lead musician, who is already doing an excellent job bringing together our many musical resources, and who is particularly encouraging the transition of our teenagers into singing as adults and working more closely for the willingness of adults to support our young choristers. 2020 has been an extremely challenging year for everyone, and we have not been immune to that by any means. But I am hopeful as we move forward that as a parish we will continue to flourish. We have the resources to reach out and develop in mission and ministry in the year ahead. And we look forward to both the arrival of our new deacon and another pastoral assistant, Thomas Hassan, over the summer. I'm delighted also that we will have Wael staying on another year as he continues to discern his calling. Thank you to everyone for your support and encouragement as we seek together to respond to God's call to serve in this place. So before we move on to the Church Warden's report, are there any questions? Thank you. Elaine says that was very positive for those who are watching online. Thank you, Elaine. Jill.
Could I just add that we hosted Rhodes in 2019 and we supported the people who were.
I think the Church Wardens might be mentioning that. We try to divvy things up a bit, so... I think that's in your report as well, Jez. Yeah. We did confer, so we didn't say the same things. But thank you, Jill. Very important things, robes and the digital divide. Absolutely, absolutely. So, Jez, can I hand over to you, who's going to speak on behalf of yourself and Vanessa? Thank you, Jez.
Good afternoon. The transition from a year of feasting, culminating with Father Mark's 10th anniversary and Richard's retirement, to a year of fasting has been a challenge, to say the least. And we're incredibly grateful to everyone who has supported the church through this time. It's been a difficult year for people in our parish, dealing with the pandemic, separation from loved ones, and financial hardship, and without the usual joys and consolations of a fully functioning St. John the Divine. It's been a particularly difficult time for our musicians, with the absence of singing for much of the year, and with the loss of Lionel. As Father Mark said, it was an extremely difficult decision to end Lionel's contract, and not one that we took lightly. I'm acutely aware of the pain it's caused for many people, including for Lionel and Jill themselves. It's also been a difficult time for our staff, including Whale, Ben, and Bet, who have had the stress of finding new ways to work without all the normal human contact that provides so much of the meaning in their roles. We're extremely grateful for all their hard work. And it's been a difficult year for the clergy. People don't see all the hard work that the clergy put in behind the scenes, particularly during a pandemic. And we're hugely grateful to Father Mark and our clergy team for keeping us all together and sane through an extremely stressful period. We're also very proud of their work on the front lines of the pandemic, both in the parish and with Father Nick and Father Mark volunteering as chaplains on the COVID wards in St. Thomas's Hospital, and also Father Seb's work in schools. We're also extremely grateful to all our volunteers, and I'd particularly like to thank Victor and Timmy for taking over as sacristans following Richard and Jan's retirement, and to all our serving team. All our cleaners, and again particularly Victor, who has done an amazing job keeping the church COVID secure. Everyone who's helped to organise deliveries for the Robes Project, especially Jill Gregson, Emmanuel Well, and Father Nick. Everyone who's worked on citizens, including Nick and Jill. It's been great to provide laptops to St. Gabriel students who were without them. And that's something that we hope to pick up over the next year to expand our engagement with citizens. I'd like to thank all our wonderful musicians and to all those who have helped with the children's choirs and consort, again, including Jill and Faith, and an increasing number of people from the adult choir as well. That's really good to see. I'd like to thank Neil Hall, who's done a huge amount of work on our buildings this year, including a major repair project on the South Aisle roof and evacuating pigeons from the church. Many thanks to people on the PCC who have worked behind the scenes, including on fundraising, finances, and organisation. To our welcomers, particularly Linda Kesse, Emmanuel, and Mabel. To Kumba, Nick Hodgson, Jill Gregson again, and there was someone else, Father Nick, for keeping Young Divinity Eagles, the poetry group, and our Friday walking group going. And to everyone who's continued to donate money sacrificially, despite the financial challenges of this year, to sustain our mission. We're looking forward to all the activities restarting and to catching up on those missed parties. As Father Mark says, we're fortunate to have the resources to invest in re-energising our life and mission as a parish, and have an extra curate arriving, Deacon Charlie Bell, and have a grant from the Society of the Sacred Mission, Father Robert's Order, to provide funds for 2 pastoral assistants over the next year. And we look forward to welcoming Tom Hassan over the summer. But we will also need new volunteers to step up and to get involved in everything from hospitality to church cleaning to children's ministry and the Robes Project. We can't assume that the same people who did all the work before the pandemic will be able or willing to continue in the same way afterwards. And we need to be aware of the risks of burnout as we reopen. So we'll need to share responsibility as widely as possible for growing our mission and ministry. Finally, I'd like to say on behalf of Vanessa and I, what a privilege it is to be church wardens in this place, and what a joy it is to work with Father Mark and all of you. And we're grateful for your continued prayers and support. Thanks very much. Any questions? No. Great.
Thanks very much indeed, Jez, and to both you and Vanessa for your wonderful work. Now, if I could hand over to Mark, who's going to, among other things, look at the 2019 and 2020 accounts.
Great. Thank you very much, Father Mark, and for Jez for preceding my turnout. Now here we can enjoy the most exciting part of the afternoon. It's the church accounts. I know you're all looking forward to, especially those of you in the comfort of your front rooms over there and watching online. I'd like to firstly give my thanks for Bet over there, who's sitting in the church here today, for all her efforts to put the numbers together, because she is the glue of our operation here, and certainly that's very, very true in the finance. So can we just raise a sort of a thanks for Bet, first of all, because she does a lot of good work. Thank you. And also for Jez and also Father Mark, who keep me on the straight and narrow when it comes to making sensible financial decisions. So thank you very much. What I'm going to talk about today is, as Father Mark mentioned, we're going to talk about the 2019 accounts very briefly. We can talk about the 2020 accounts. I'm going to do a little short how we're going to look forward into the accounts. We're going to keep it short because I think there's a few more things to cover today. And I think it's just worth mentioning that, and for those of you online, we have got hard copies that were at the back of the church. A few people have seen the hard copies of the 2019-2020 accounts, but I understand these will be put online, so if anybody wants to look at these electronically, they'll be available, and of course, for those that prefer the good old-fashioned paper, it will be there as well. So, for 2019, first of all. Now, 2019, if you cast your minds back a couple of years ago, we had a relatively good year. We had sort of net incoming resources of about £40,000, and we had some expenditure on development. So we had sort of roughly about 40,000 on the whole developments there. And we had quite a good year on the capital markets as well. The church has investments, which as part of my job is to make sure these are invested wisely. They're invested with the CCLA, so ethical fund, which is essentially run by the Church of England in sort of mixture of shares and also bonds. We also had a bit of income from the curate's house. Now we're blessed with a very able curate, Father Nick, as we've heard about. So unfortunately we don't get that money, but it was a good year financially. For 2020, we did have quite substantial incoming resources of about £15,000. Now, although that sounds brilliant, a lot of these were due to exceptional activities. For example, the various projects which took place, which had taken place in the further year. So we did have substantially lower donations, roughly sort of 26,000. So donations down about 15%. And obviously, one of the things I'm going to talk about in a minute is about sort of next year, how we're going to sort of drive that forward. We had COVID restrictions as well, which I know impacted many people negatively, adversely financially, of course, so people struggled to support the church financially, although they've obviously been doing it many other ways, as Father Mark has said, which is good. So that also meant we've also had slightly less going out as well, because some of the activities we did have had to be curtailed. But we've spent a little bit more on maintenance. We've obviously upgraded our audio-visual experience, so hopefully those at home are having a seamless experience right now, thanks to the hard work of Well and other members of the church here. We've also completed the St. Gabriel's College Chapel. I believe that is now complete now. Not quite complete, but that's been a sort of big sort of little project that we've been working on. So that's really sort of 2020, really. That gives you a bit of colour to the year. It's not been as bad as perhaps it could have been, but it's been a bit, as you would expect, slightly less good for COVID. So looking forward to 2021, as Father Mark mentioned, the focus on our expenditure will be on relaunching the church, bringing this forward in terms of hospitality, possibly recommencing the development project, and continue with our programme of maintenance of the church, which is its priority, as we've mentioned before. We also will be looking to a new auditor. Linda Noel is due to retire. She's been checking my numbers every year and producing the nice accounts that you see typically. So we'll have to think about a replacement for her, so we'll discuss that with that. So in conclusion, we've talked about the accounts. The accounts will be available on the website in due course. I don't know how long it will take to get there, but if you want to query that in detail. The accounts have already been agreed by the PCC, but obviously there's an opportunity now if anyone has any questions or if they want to ask future questions, you'd be very welcome. So I see one question there, sir.
Partly comment, partly question. I wanted actually to say that it's a very pleasant surprise reading the accounts, how we've actually financially come through, all the privations, much better than one might have expected. And so that's also great thanks to yourself and indeed everyone else directly involved. Clearly we do have the great benefit of having the endowment from past benefactors and so on, which puts us in a good position. And clearly obviously there was pain over music, but nonetheless I think that we can be quite proud of what you have done collectively to make sure that we have got through this. I did want to just make one point, and that's, one thing obviously you would have had reductions in Sunday raising of money, and one thing it is quite difficult to, we can't really give on a Sunday occasionally through gift aid at the moment. There's no envelopes are readily available, and some places do have online things where you can swipe it at the service or whatever. And for some of us, I give a sort of monthly amount, but I then tend to like giving something actually when I can't, and that's actually quite difficult to sort of do in feeling it's a totally effective way without that. So I hope that, particularly if restrictions over things like envelopes are going to carry on, that you can think of a way of actually doing that to get that income back up as people come back. My second point was on the music. Obviously it's very sad about the change that had to be made to staffing, but is it the intention to bring all of the various aspects of the music back up to the strength that they were before? I very much hope so, because obviously that's a great benefit. Every sign of that with the gradual increase in this is there, but it'll be reassuring. And just, as one of the probably one of the least diverse people here, if one personally, either diverse or undiverse, one thing that has always struck me in the 20 years of coming to this church is the way that the senior choir, excellent as it is very undiverse. Lots of people very like me. And I think that what was said about bringing the more people in the more junior choirs into the senior choir, I'm sure that is something that would be very good for the overall look. There's not sort of two worlds out there, one the choir and one the rest of us. Finally, I But I do think that ultimately people should have been given the credit to use their own responsibility. And it is a very big building. It is actually quite easy to have socially distancing here. And it was very, very disappointing to me. Fortunately, there were some churches in London elsewhere that were open, and one was able to go there. But it was a great sadness to me, and I don't know who made the decision, whether it came from the committee or from the clergy themselves or whatever. But hopefully we'll never be faced with anything like that again. But I must place on record my great disappointment of a sort of feeling of abandonment, despite the online stuff, which is great, but it's not a full substitute for the sacrament and everything that goes with it. So I just wanted to place that on record at the same time as commending everyone on the financial and other aspects of keeping things going. So I could take up a little bit of time.
Great. Well, I first of all, I'll repeat those questions for those online. Secondly, I'm probably not the most qualified to answer all of them, so I can answer the ones which are financially related. So there are 4 questions for those people online, and I think Nick is minuting your points. Thank you. So we talked about, firstly, about the giving methodology. So in terms of giving, that's a very good point. How are we going to get back up? The envelopes, I understand, are going to continue. We've also got a credit card machine, which should be somewhere, which will be at the back of the church. So people you get your phone out if you've got an NFC. So that will make it easier. So I think it's a very good point. We want to make it easy to give. And up and running for next week, as Father Mark says. So we're going to have a credit card machine at the back of the church for those that want easy giving and not have to handle cash. And I think the third thing with that, there is a Just Giving website. So for more casual giving, justgiving.com. If you Google justgiving.com, St. John the Divine, if you feel like giving a bit extra on top of that, or don't know the church account number, what have you, you can do that, and it's very welcome to give that. And nowadays, Just Giving don't charge a fee. You can offer a fee, so it's done at cost by them now. The second question was around music, and I guess I'm probably less qualified to talk about that. In terms of the music, I understand it's going to continue as is, as it was, rather, to improve it. And I think I'd probably better not say anything more than that, because I think that the church wardens and Father Mark might like to say something around that. And the same thing goes for the choir. The verse in the choir, again, it's probably not really my expertise there. The church closure as well, we talked about, number 4. That was a sort of PCC decision. Obviously, it's a judgment call. Obviously, we had to make that choice. Again, probably nothing more I can say as treasurer about on that one. But thank you. Any more questions, finance related? Yes. So the question, as I understand. Yes, sorry, I missed. The question was, are we still supporting the mission charities? Yes, absolutely, we are supporting that, both in terms of, typically, as a church, you can give to the church and specify for the charities. At the moment, we don't sort of give a proportion of the church's income, per se, but it's specifically restricted funds. So if you give any of the money to any of the 3 mission charities and tell Bet or tell me that it's for those charities, they will go there, and so that is still continuing. Yes, Richard, sir. Yes, so the question from Richard was, we had a collection for St. Vincent specifically after the volcano that happened a month or so ago. The answer is it went through the church accounts, yes. And it's £750. I think Father Mark mentioned it last week. Yeah, it'll be in the 2021 accounts. Yeah. It won't, because it's restricted income. No. Any other questions? Have you got any questions online? Well, any comments coming through there? Okay, good. Okay, thank you very much. I'll hand back to Father Mark.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark. And just to follow on from Mark's response to the question about music, there's absolutely no question of dumbing things down. Not on my watch. We want things to flourish, but we would like things to be more inclusive and there to be more integration between the choirs that we have, which will be good for everyone all round, I think. Thank you. Now it must be over to you, Nick, for the PCC report. And you're also going to say a bit about Synod and report on the Electoral Roll. Thanks very much indeed, Nick.
The advantage of going last is that practically everything has already been said, so all being well, can be brief. Just picking up on one thing from Mark Dickinson's report, mentioning Linda Noel, our independent examiner, who is probably retiring this year. It is a function of the annual meeting to elect the independent examiner. Can I have your approval by a show of hands to allow the PCC to choose our independent examiner when we know exactly what Linda's position is? Because I think she might be willing to just scrape another year for us, but we might have to look elsewhere. So are you happy that the PCC, when it knows what the position is, chooses an examiner later this year? Everybody seems to be happy. Thank you very much indeed. I'll do the electoral roll number first. We've had a few new forms this year. One person, Hermine Grossier, has died, so has obviously come off the roll. So the roll is now at 229. The Deanery Synod, there was one major event at the Deanery Synod in 2020, a motion calling on the House of Bishops to commend an order of prayer and dedication for same-sex couples. We had a good debate on that subject in the PCC, and there was a good debate at the Deanery Synod as well. And the motion was passed by the Deanery Synod by 35 votes to 19. I can tell you that all your Deanery Synod representatives voted in favour of the motion. What I meant to do and have failed to do is to see what has happened to that motion. It will have gone to the Southwark Diocesan Synod, but I don't know where it is now. I think several dioceses have been passing similar resolutions, but I will endeavour to find out. The Deanery Synod, as far as I know, has not met in this last year, but has done one particularly enterprising thing, which was the Deanery Stations of the Cross. I don't know how many of you were able to see those, but I went to about half of them, and they were very good indeed. St. Gabriel's had a station, and we had a station, and I know Father Seb said that about 80 people visited on that one day at St. Gabriel's Chapel. So that was a very imaginative initiative from the Deanery Synod, words which do not usually appear in the same sentence. The PCC itself met 4 times in 2019-2020 and 4 times again in 2020-2021. And of course, they were entirely different. The previous year, it was all about the social team and harvest suppers and Windrush and the youth project and the new youth club and open church and everything like that. The last year, 4 meetings, all of them online, all about how we have pastoral care for people during lockdown, how we do our online services, how we cope with the difficult decision of abolishing the Director of Music post, how we look ahead to what we're going to do, how we get people back, how we raise more money so that our income is back to the same levels. So 2 completely contrasting years. The only thing I think I need to add to what's been said is just a bit more on buildings. We've had, thanks to Neil, for the works on over to my left behind me, which doesn't help those online. We've also had the repair of the church clock, which was done to far smaller cost than had been anticipated. But again, looking ahead, we want to become a carbon neutral church and to become a proper eco-parish. This again, it's initiatives going on all over the Church of England. The Diocese of Southwark is seeking to become an eco-diocese. So it's a long-term project. My guess is we'll need a small committee specially for that. But we've had all the talk about the pandemic. There's climate change as well, and we all need to play our part in that too. As I say, I think everything else has been mentioned by those who've gone before, but if anyone has any questions on the work of the PCC over the last 2 years, speak now. In that case, half a second later, back to Father Mark.
Thank you very much indeed, Nick. Perhaps I should have said at the beginning of my report, actually, that I'm exercising the vicar's prerogative of appointing deputy church wardens, and I'm going to reappoint Linda and Emmanuel as deputy church wardens. So, time for lunch, I think, isn't it? So let's gather our thoughts together as we commit this meeting and to our work going ahead, and all those for whom we care, and for the peace of the world. Let us offer this all up to God as we say together the words of the grace. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen. Buon pranzo.